Welcome to And Action on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Workshop, a workshop on mentorship and hiring practices in the costume industry, presented by CAFTCAD's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. This workshop featured 5 panelists who have extensive experience in the hiring process, as well as a workshop facilitator. Now I'm pleased to introduce our panelists and our moderator for this workshop. Farnaz Kakisadi is an award-winning costume designer based out of Vancouver, BC, with over 20 years of experience designing for film, TV, and theater. Farnaz has designed for television series such as Upload Seasons 1 to 3 for Amazon Prime, Marvel's Hellstrom for Hulu, CW's The 100 Season 5, and upcoming Avatar: The Last Airbender live-action series for Netflix. She has also designed for features such as Hello Goodbye and Everything in Between, Brain on Fire, and Afghan Luke. Farnaz has been serving as a member of the CAFTCAD Executive Board and as co-chair on the CAFTCAD DEI Committee for the last 3 years. Beverly Huynh is a costume designer originating from Vancouver, BC, Canada. Since 2009, her career path has been with the film and television industry as an active member of the costume department for IATSE 891 and ACFC. As a creative and an artist, she has experience in designing, sewing, embroidery, pattern drafting, illustration, painting, and various other skills in fabrication. After spending years learning from other experts in her field in Canada, the United Kingdom, Europe, and Asia, Beverly has returned to Vancouver to utilize all that she has learned. Her credits include Joyride, Lionsgate, School Spirits, Paramount Plus, Honor Society, Paramount Plus, and much more. Tova Harrison is a costume supervisor, coordinator, and tracker for film and television. Tova accidentally started working in production in 2003 when a friend asked her to help out on an independent short film. When Tova returned to film in 2019, she decided to join the costume department on the advice of a friend, costume designer Gersha Phillips. In the costume department, Tova has worked on Star Trek Discovery Seasons 3 and 4, in South Africa on The Woman King, on Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, The Boys Season 4. Lindsay Reeder has enjoyed a career in mainstream media and is a proud member of the BIPOC film and television community, representing the I in BIPOC, as her family is from the Mississauga of the New Credit First Nation. Over the past 12 years, Lindsay has gone from wardrobe assistant on commercials to costume designer, working on projects internationally, and is currently working in key positions on IATSE 873 productions. Lindsay is also a 2021 CAFTCAD Award winner for costume design for TV period for her work on Netflix Age of Samurai Battle for Japan. Anissa Abdus Samad is a Toronto native costumer and costume designer for TV and film. She first started her career in the fashion industry before migrating over to costuming. With almost 10 years of experience in union costume departments, Anissa bounces between the positions of BG coordinator and costume set supervisor. She also does costume designs on independent shows and films. Our moderator for this workshop, Natasha Toney, is the CEO of Vancouver-based Elevate Inclusion Strategies and is a sought-after labor relations specialist, consultant, leadership coach, trainer, and speaker. In 2022, Natasha was recognized as a Black leader in Vancouver by the Vancouver Economic Commission. Natasha is committed to applying an intersectional human rights and reconciliation lens to all that she does. Natasha works with corporations, businesses, crown corporations, all levels of government, labor unions, and social justice organizations. Her work requires a deep understanding of organizational structure, strategic initiatives, inclusive leadership, and human resources. This workshop was recorded via Zoom in March 2023 and may occasionally include the quirky sounds of background noises, Zoom notifications, and the like. We thank you in advance for your understanding, and we hope you enjoy this video. If at any time you have questions or feedback, please email info@CAFTCAD.com.
The portion of Turtle Island, North America, we now call Canada, has been home since time immemorial to the ancestors of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. As a national organization, CAFTCAD operates in various corners of Turtle Island, and we acknowledge that many of us at CAFTCAD are settlers working and living on traditional territories of the first people of this land.
In addition, we acknowledge the land in which CAFTCAD's home office is located and where many of our events take place is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also recognize that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. It is also in the Dish with One Spoon Treaty territory, which was made between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land.
Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect.
As our organization has members from coast to coast, we acknowledge that many of our members work on traditional and unceded territories of a variety of Indigenous people. To understand and read more about the many Indigenous people and territories that exist here in the land we now know as Canada, please go to native-land.ca.
Hello, everybody. Sorry, I'll put my camera back on now. And I will spotlight myself as I speak. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming out today. And welcome to And Action on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, a workshop on mentorship and hiring practices in the costume industry presented by CAFTCAD's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping things to mention. For attendance purposes, if you haven't already, please just ensure that the name on your Zoom account is the name that you registered for this workshop with, just so we can take an attendance. When utilizing the chat section on the panel, on the right side of the screen, we just ask that you select to everyone if your comments are meant to be shared with everybody so that everyone can get in on the conversation. To submit questions for the panelist or moderator today, you can use the chat section as well, and I will be doing my best to bring those questions back to the moderator and the panelists at the appropriate times today. If time allows, and if you'd like to, you can unmute yourself to ask your question, but please just indicate that in the question that you submit and say whether or not you'd like to ask it yourself when the time allows. At the start of this call, everybody heard a notification to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded, and that's the CAFTCAD account recording this workshop today for later use and for reference for others to access. If you do not wish to be in the recording, please just make sure you keep your camera and microphone off. However, in the breakout rooms, it will not be recorded. So you're welcome to put your cameras and microphones on at that time if you'd like to as well. And we are encouraging people, if they'd like to keep their cameras on today for the workshop, they are more than welcome to do that. We just ask that while the panelists and the moderators are speaking, that people keep their microphones on mute just to get rid of any extra noise and distractions. Now I'm very pleased to introduce our panelists for today, as well as our moderator. Farnaz Kafi Sadi is a costume designer, a CAFTCAD board member, and our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee co-chair. Farnaz is an award-winning costume designer based out of Vancouver, British Columbia, with over 20 years of experience designing for film, TV, and theater. Farnaz has designed for television series such as Upload Season 1 to 3 on Amazon Prime, Marvel's Hellstrom for Hulu, the CW's The 100 Season 5, and the upcoming Avatar: The Last Airbender live action series for Netflix. She has also designed for features such as Hello, Goodbye, and Everything in Between, Brain on Fire, and Afghan Luke. Farnaz has been serving as a member of the CAFTCAD Executive Board and as a co-chair on the CAFTCAD DEI Committee for the last 3 years. Beverly Hung is a costume designer originating from Vancouver, British Columbia. Since 2009, her career path has been with the film and television industry as an active member of the costume department for IATSE 891 and ACFC. As a creative and an artist, she has experience in designing, sewing, embroidery, pattern drafting, illustration, painting, and various other skills in fabrication. After spending years learning from other experts in her field in Canada, the United Kingdom, Europe, and Asia, Beverly has returned to Vancouver to utilize all that she has learned. Her credits include Joyride for Lionsgate, School Spirit for Paramount Plus, Honor Society for Paramount Plus, and much more. Tova Harrison is a costume supervisor, coordinator, and tracker for film and television. Tova accidentally started working in production in 2003 when a friend asked her to help out on an independent short film on the production. On that production, Tova ended up being the production coordinator, PA, producer, and director's assistant, and craft services, and the lunch caterer with the home cooked meals. While she should have walked away and never looked back, it was the first production Tova found a love for the film industry. Since then, Tova has worked in the production office as a PA and assistant production coordinator. Since then, Tova has worked in the production office as a PA and assistant production coordinator, took a break from the filmmaking world to start her lifelong dream of opening a bakery in 2013. When Tova returned to film in 2019, she decided to join the costume department on the advice of a friend and costume designer, Gersha Phillips. In the costume department, Tova has worked on Star Trek Discovery Season 3 and 4, in South Africa on The Woman King, on Star Trek Strange New World Season 2, and The Boys Season 4. Lindsay Reeder has enjoyed a career in mainstream media, but is a proud member of the BIPOC film and television community as well. The I in BIPOC, her family is from the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations, located just outside of Brantford, Ontario. Over the past 12 years, Lindsay has gone from wardrobe assistant on commercials to costume designer, working on projects internationally, and is currently in key positions on IATSE 873 productions. Lindsay is also a 2021 CAFTCAD Award winner for costume design for TV, period, for her work on Netflix's Age of Samurai Battle for Japan. Anissa Abdus Samad is a Toronto native costumer and costume designer for TV and film. She first started her career in the fashion industry before migrating over to costuming. With almost 10 years of experience in union costume departments, Anissa bounces between the positions of BG coordinator and costume set supervisor. She also does costume design on independent shows and films. And finally, our moderator for this afternoon, Natasha Toney, CEO of Vancouver-based Elevate Inclusion Strategies, is a sought-after labor relations specialist, consultant, leadership coach, trainer, and speaker. In 2022, Natasha was recognized as a Black leader in Vancouver by the Vancouver Economic Commission. Natasha is committed to applying an intersectional human rights and reconciliation lens to all that she does. Natasha works with corporations, businesses, crown corporations, all levels of government, labor unions, and social justice organizations. Her work requires a deep understanding of organizational structure, strategic initiatives, inclusion leadership, and human resources. I will now hand the floor over to you, Natasha.
Well, thank you. And I want to say good morning to those of us on the West Coast. I'm coming to you from Vancouver. Hi, Glenn, see you there. And the traditional territories that I'm calling in from are the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people right here in Vancouver. Lovely to see some of the cameras on, and wanted to really take the opportunity before we go into the panel discussion is to be able to use this as an opportunity for you to go into breakout rooms to say hello to each other. I think that, I've been doing a lot of facilitating online over the last 3 years and taking an opportunity to build connection. We're together for 2 hours and being able to ask some of these questions to build and cultivate a space for us to have the deeper conversations that we need to have. And the panelists will be very generous in sharing their perspective and experience. But I know that with questions and your own lived experience, that if we can create a space where we can see some of each other, say hello, and just share who we are and what it is that we do. We've just built a little bit of time, just probably 6 minutes, for you as participants to go into smaller breakout rooms, pop your cameras on, say hello, and your name, what it is that you do, and why it was important for you to jump on this call and spend 2 hours on your Sunday. I know Sundays can be meant for rest and also chores and whatever else we need to do in connecting with our loved ones, but spending our time together today is really important. So we have Tessa in the background creating breakout rooms, but just to be able to break the ice and say hello so that we know who's in the room. You will be zoomed into a breakout room and you can see in the chat that your script is there. So just a quick round of hellos to each other, what it is that you do and why it was important for you to attend today's session. And so Tessa, if you're ready, to send folks into the breakout room, this would be the time to do it. And you don't have to do anything, folks. You'll be zoomed in, kind of like Star Trek, zoomed in to the breakout room, say hello to each other. And then when the time is up, you'll be zoomed back into the main room and we'll dive right into our scheduled programming. Hi, welcome back, and lovely to see more cameras on. Really appreciate that. So now you know a little bit of who's in the room and you can take a peek as well on your screens as people's cameras are on. So as was mentioned in my bio, being in film and television, I've seen quite a bit over the last 30 years of my career in film and TV. And I would say that a lot of the conversations I've been having over the last 5 years, more specifically the last 2.5 years, 3.5 years, when we talk about culture shift. And it isn't that we haven't been talking about inclusion, that we haven't been talking about the impacts of exclusion in the workplace and in our industry. And, it has been, we can sort of track some of the bigger campaigns and conversations even in Hollywood before the last 3 years. When I think about Time's Up in the States, they talked about pay equity. Here in Canada, we've been talking about pay equity through women in film and TV, through many different through unions, women in the director's chair, pay equity. Even when we think about red carpets, and I don't know if you remember back in 2015, it was hashtag Ask Her More, talking about sexism on the red carpet. Same time, hashtag Oscars So White. Also, there was that shift. I remember 2018, there was the talk of inclusion riders, and again, talking about pay equity. And we're talking about representation in front of the camera and holding our industry accountable. 86% of top films featured white actors when we were having these conversations, and representation in film and TV. We're having those conversations in front of the camera, behind the camera, but still highlighting that over the last few years that 92% of the top film directors are men, so that we're having these conversations. But what's happened over the last few years is that representation matters for us as crew members, and that there are conversations, whether that's happening at the bargaining table, through diversity, equity, and inclusion committees, that you know, we're here together because of diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, and so that we're seeing that in many organizations now, where we're having deeper conversations around how do we do this work in a good way. And we are at a point in the culture shift where as workers, we have an opportunity to really have these conversations. We don't necessarily have to have all the answers, but we've brought together a dynamic group of panelists who can talk about these issues and from their perspective. And also, you know, there's the expert power in the room of your experiences. And so we can be in conversation through this workshop around how we can build sustainable diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, practices, so that we can open up those doors and keep them open. And so I'm very excited to start with the first question for you to get to know the panelists a little bit more. And with Farnaz, Beverly, Tova, Lindsay, and Anissa, I'm just going to ask you just again for a bit of an icebreaker, just a brief explanation about what motivated you to build a career in film and television. And Farnaz, I'll start with you.
Sure. My passion has always been to become a designer. I've known basically since I was a little girl that I wanted to design, that I wanted to create. And I started off in fashion, and then I learned up the program at UBC that offered design for theater and film. And I went there, and I actually went there to do my business degree, and I transferred over to the theater program there because I learned about it. And I fell in love with creating characters and building characters, and just, you know, the idea of, you know, finding this personality on a script, on a page, and bringing it to life was just something that was really different than what I had sort of like done in the past. And then so I started with working in theater, and a friend of mine had a panic attack because she was doing an indie film, and she had some issues and she couldn't do it anymore, and she didn't want to burn a bridge with the producers. So she's like, can you please come in and take over for me and do this? I'd never done a film before. So she's like, I'll help you crew up. I'll help you with everything, you know, you need to know. And I'll give you like a crash course in 2 days, and just, it's not different than theater. I'm like, okay. So I did my first film. I fell in love with it, and I loved the rush that you get, the hustle and bustle of it. And it's been sort of like keep going from there.
So the sink or swim method is what you're talking about.
Yeah, basically I got
yeah,
thrown in
wonderful.
with the wolves and had to fight my way through, and here I am.
Thank you for that. How about for you, Beverly?
My story actually mirrors Farnaz's very similarly. I knew I wanted to be in clothing and fashion since I was 7. Ultimately, I determined at around like 18, I wasn't actually really good at anything else. Theater in high school, like this was what I was really good at. I just really enjoyed it a lot. And even through business school, I was driving out to like Edmonton, and I'm originally from Calgary, and doing like, you know, time for print photo shoots to just build a portfolio of any kind I could come up with, buying things from H&M, which was cool at the time. And then, you know, styling these wannabe models and returning the clothes, like everything you can think of to just try and build a portfolio of any kind. Because I was a theater kid, I moved to Vancouver, traveled here and studied at Art Institute of Vancouver for fashion design and marketing. And a friend of mine who was studying at BFS was like, hey, I'm doing a short film. Would you be interested in helping me out design the short film? I said, sure, why not? And then it snowballed from there. Graduation, I think AI was like a 2-year program at the time. First year, I was like, perfect attendance. Second year, I was like, I'm getting work. So I was kind of like just tiptoeing in and out of school and had like connections in the film industry, started at Hallmark, and just again, time for learning basically, and just got my feet really wet and fell in love with costumes. It just made sense. And then because I always wanted to be a fashion designer, the natural transition was costume design. And here I am, 15 years
Wonderful.
later.
Wonderful. Thank you, Beverly. Lindsay, what motivated you to build your career in film and TV? I don't know if we can get you off of mute.
There we go.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thanks, everybody. I'm part of a very large family full of various different types of artists, painters, designers, sewers, musicians. So it was just kind of in my family. And did I get into that? I had a lot of friends that were working in commercials, actually broadcast commercial and integrated campaigns. And just because I had been doing some styling of my own for a travel show back in the day, somebody asked me, hey, would you like to try to take your skills and do styling, wardrobe styling for commercials? And I said, I think I would really love that. And, they were right. And I did that for probably, 3 to 5 years, and just gradually started exploring other avenues and going, okay, well, if I can do this and I can do this, and then getting to know the places that we use in the industry, like Berman or like Liberty, and going, holy crap, like you can literally make a character out of anything for anything. And I was just kind of hooked. So, and then I started going into just getting involved and getting on resources and groups, and then just responding to things that were smaller, and then just gradually started getting into bigger productions, like not just non-union stuff and union stuff. And I really fell in love with it, and I don't think I could do anything else either. But it is, again, like most of my other panelists are saying, it is creating the character. It's taking a person and going, okay, I'm going to convey on the screen before this actor even speaks one line, give little hints to the audience about, oh, who is this person? And clothing really helps tell stories of a character, and I really love that.
Thank you. And we know you're on the road traveling, and so we were able to catch
I'm sorry about that.
most of it, but we will let you know if it cuts in and out a little bit. And Anissa, what made you decide to build your career in TV, film and TV?
I'm going to sound similar to a lot of the panelists here, simply because it wasn't, well, for me, actually, the difference for me is that I didn't go into film knowing that I wanted to design. So I was working in fashion, and long story short, I had an opportunity to work on an indie film. Not having any film experience, I let that be known. But then after working on that experience, where I was hired to be the set supervisor, but I ended up doing a lot of the buying, a lot of the aging and breakdown. I was the set supervisor. So kind of similar to what Tova's introduction was, kind of just doing a whole bunch of different things. But I fell in love with film and costuming after that first experience. And then from that point on, I started to educate myself on costuming and the differences between that and fashion. And for me, one of the things that really stuck out is the fact that you're creating a character as opposed to just dressing someone up who's beautiful with models and so on and so forth. So that's the thing that really stuck out to me, how creative you can be within costuming, costume design. And I just, fell in love with it from then and wanted to pursue it after that.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Tova, in your bio, which is very interesting, in being in film, opening up a business, and then that thing about coming back to film. Sometimes we break up with film and come back. So often I'll ask, what makes you stay? So you came back. Gersha invited you to look at costumes, and do you want to talk from that time in your life?
Sure. So initially, I didn't really see a spot for myself within the costume department, just because I don't have a fashion background. I never really thought of myself as a fashion type of person, other than being a shopaholic. Yeah, I was more into like event planning, putting things together, coordinating, and that. So going into film from that side of it. So that's why I landed at the production office. But then when I came back to film and Gersha brought me in as a tracker, it gave me a chance to see all the other parts of how the department runs. And I immediately pinpointed that I wanted to start supervising. So, which is, kind of like the event planner, kind of pulling things together, pulling people together. So that's how I got in. I don't have the passion for costume designing or any of that, although I love it and respect all of that. But for my path, it was more the supervising path and coordinating and pulling people together. And yeah, so that's when I came back, I started coordinating and now supervising, which was, where I saw myself going and heading. And yeah, that's how I got into it.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mhm.
And I think that as we answer some of the questions that I'll ask, these themes will come back in. I think that probably similar stories, even with our participants around that commitment to building a career once we fall into it, or even if it is more intentional. But I think that something that you said that also will expand on is that within the department, there's so many opportunities and skills, and being able to really highlight that as well, I think it is important. And, the question that I'm going to ask everyone to answer when we think about the culture shift and we're, doing this analysis around where we're at, where we've been, and where we want to go, when we talk about being purposeful around diversity, equity, and inclusion. The question that I'm going to put forward to the panelists is, what should the industry do to improve DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and using that lens? And I want us to particularly talk about it from outreach, from hiring, from training and education. And Lindsay, I'll start with you. Just when we think about the potential of building DEI practices in and thinking about outreach, training, and hiring, what are some key pieces that come to mind for you?
Well, it's something that obviously you have to really look for to find, no matter where we are, what city we're working for, what country we're working for, is knowing where to start and where to look. As somebody who is from any particular group that's looking to get into film, or somebody that's looking to hire somebody that's looking to get into film, it's tough to really know where to get those resources. And I found that CAFTCAD has been doing a really excellent job of putting, two people together, or putting an organization with the person together. And I'm lucky enough that I didn't have an experience where, as an Indigenous costumer, I didn't really have a hard time. I just kind of fell into it, luckily. But for people that are looking to get into it that don't know where to go, I would highly recommend, especially Tessa. She's great.
Thank you. Farnaz?
Probably I will agree with Lindsay as well on that. It's a lot of awareness and just doing a lot of research and looking into it, and joining communities like CAFTCAD and even our local unions, and just digging in and asking questions to kind of like find a way. It's not something that's like readily available, like that we can, there are resources, but unfortunately, not everybody is aware of them. So we really have to search for it at this point. I know, Natasha, you put a great list together for this program that we will share with everybody as well. So I think there's a lot of resources on that people can also go into, but it's just really being mindful, aware, and looking into it. And even I have people following me on, messaging me on Facebook and Instagram and asking me questions, and I have no problems like directing people that way. So don't be afraid to ask. If you see anybody that is in costumes or, doing something that you like doing and you want to do, don't be afraid to reach out and ask them. You may get a couple of no's, but you will eventually get a yes, and you will get someone that will direct you. So.
Tova?
Well, with regards to outreach, I think that as a department and as an industry, we just need to do more with getting out into the community. I accidentally fell into film. I'm sure a lot of people have that similar story. It's something that I didn't even realize was a option for me at a young age. So even like over the March break, we had gone into schools, a friend of mine, and we were invited to a school. So we just talked about being in the industry, being in the department. And we were speaking to younger kids at that time, but even catching, kids as they're trying to develop or figure out what they want to do in their careers. I feel like it's good to get within the communities, let people know that this is an option for life, because a lot of times that's how people get in, is somebody has told them about it, they haven't heard about it before, they see and they watch movies, but it's like beyond them how that ever gets made. And so I think it's important for us to get within the communities, and that's where I would start.
Thank you. Anissa?
Well, Toby, you just took that right up from underneath, because I was going to say the exact same thing, but you've actually done it. So that's amazing. I was going to say that something for me that I would have benefited from would be people coming into schools, and specifically high schools, because that's when you're kind of trying to figure out the next step for your life. And having it more available in your community, or knowing that these opportunities exist, I feel like it would just give more students insight onto the kind of careers that they could have. And with costuming, if you do have any interest in costuming, clothes, fashion, not knowing that this kind of opportunity exists would kind of hinder you. So I feel like if we were to, with CAFTCAD or with, IATSE, getting into schools as an organization, I feel like that would have real impact on the future generations to come, because then it would be, like Tova said, more readily available in our community, and people would know that it's a viable career option for them, as opposed to just something that happens every once in a while in Toronto. Because I did know that they film here growing up, but I honestly thought it was one-offs. I did not know that it was a whole industry that essentially you can have a really successful career in.
Thank you. And Beverly?
I wholeheartedly agree with the entire panel. It really does start with conversation, and everyday conversation. And I don't know about everyone's experience here, especially if you're a shopper, but 90% of the time, if I'm out shopping, I have the retailers and I have the people who are the employees there wanting to ask me questions all the time. And sincerely, I have no problem leaving my phone number with them. Like, if you ever want to have a coffee, if you ever want to have a conversation, if you have questions, ask me anything. I'm an open book. I really do think it's just starting the conversation and saying yeah, you don't have to work in retail forever. It's great that this is an opportunity for you, but there are other options for you. And yeah, I think just talking about it, and I like seeing that this is where the cultural shift is changing, especially for people of BIPOC, backgrounds. It's that we have more people coming up to us asking these questions of what we're doing and how they can be more involved. So it's nice to see that there is a change happening, but it really does start with conversation and getting out into the communities and, talking to your friends' kids that this is an opportunity, and like, it's just starting that, dialogue so that we can all get involved. But yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that, what I can share, Farnaz had talked about, and I think that it went out to everyone, just some links. When we talk about the culture shift that's happening here in Canada, it's amazing. I want to talk about screen offices. There's the Black screen office, there's the Indigenous screen office, there's the racial equity screen office, and there's the disability screen office. There are programs, research that's also being done. There are programs when I talk about training, you'll see that there's accelerator programs, that these are screen offices that are funded federally through Heritage Canada. They've only come up, if you haven't heard about them, in the last couple of years. And they are starting to do work in amplifying the work of filmmakers. And so that I think that there's an opportunity for CAFTCAD and the screen offices to start to partner and to talk about where are there opportunities for mentorship, outreach, and pathways. And I want to talk about an initiative here in British Columbia called Creative Pathways. And again, provincial government through Creative BC piloted a program. I was an advisor on it. So this is where I kind of have the inside scoop, where there were, and you may have seen some of the outreach if you are IATSE 891 members, we're asking for mentorship. And it's building pathways for equity groups to folks, equity seeking folks who would like to be in film. But it is around placing, building mentorship, having conversations, and building those networks. And so there are some programs that you can dial into. And even if you're not in British Columbia, check it out, because there may be something in Toronto or in another province that there is this real shift that's happening. But also with the screen offices and with funding, people are getting to write, direct, and produce their stories who identify as Black, Indigenous, and racialized, identify as LGBTQ two-spirit, who identify that have disability. And that when we have these opportunities, that we will be able to also work on these productions, and knowing that there is an additional pathway, that even when we share out with each other around how we tripped into the industry or fell into the industry, that there is an opportunity in culture shift to really dial in to the screen offices, to what is going on and who's getting to make films, because these are pathways where even if you're still building up your resume and experience, that I think that there's more opportunities than there was even 3 years ago when we're having these conversations. And so I've put together some links. It's not an exhaustive link. We will talk about hiring as well, and know that there are databases that are on those links where you can start to bridge your networks, but even to put your names on those databases and networks so that people know where you're at. The outreach programs, I think, are key. When Beverly talks about being 7 and knowing that this was, we do know at different times. I think I was in my drama class in the community center at that time and thought I was going to be an actor, right? So that we do know So it's being able to plant those seeds and opportunities, whether it's purposeful and being at job fairs and being part of mentorship programs, being able to support in the outreach, that I don't think that it's too young. And so I'm seeing mentorship programs and definitely conversations happening within kind of unions and guilds and organizations and associations. And having the diversity committee as well has been an amazing way to start to build some of that outreach out. And so these conversations may feel new, but again, we're at that place where you dial in and you will make more of a splash and culture shift because you're a part of putting yourself on the database as well. And when we talk about how do we connect with opportunities, there are a lot of talented people from diverse and racialized backgrounds. And so how do we ensure access to these resources, information, and opportunities in a way that when you are building your team, are you, and I'll ask our panelists, are you able to use some of these resources, kind of be purposeful about how you're building your teams and the people that you're building your teams with? I know that there's the skill set, but are you able to also access more diverse folks, or are you finding that there's some barriers as well to this? And so Farnaz, I'll start with you.
For the most part, I feel like that there is still a lot of barriers there in terms of like awareness and people, like, when resumes come across your desk and you kind of meet with people, it's you don't always get a lot of diversity come your way. I don't know if it's just people are not aware or afraid, or it's still quite, I find it that it's still quite a bit of a barrier there. For the most part, I try to have as much diversity in my team as possible, especially if I'm doing shows where it requires sort of like knowledge and experience of people who have experience with certain cultural costumes, getting them involved. My last project, we had a lot of Indigenous and Asian influences. So we reached out to the communities and we tried to hire from them, from the communities, to get involved in the project with us to help us, have a better cultural representation. So yeah, it's I think on both sides, it's still a lot of reaching. So it's not a lot of availability. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. But
I think it does. I mean, I think that, as we go down the panelists and have some of these, and share some of the observations, is that I think that, what happens is we're in a culture shift. We're identifying that we need to do more outreach and let people know that if people don't know that this is a job, and our hiring practices have definitely been exclusive in the past. The industry, it's who you know. It's your in-group bias that can happen. And so we start to identify where some of the gaps are. But what I really appreciate, and again, for the panelists to kind of expand upon, is that when we are working on shows, that there is an outreach that needs to happen, right? And that you're building connection with community. That when we talk about even building connection within Indigenous community, there is, when you go on to either the Creative Pathways website or probably the Indigenous Screen Office, that there is a whole PDF around protocols, Indigenous protocols for film and TV that has been put together, right? So that when we are doing the outreach, that we're doing it in a way that is culturally aware and sensitive, and that we're able to do that as well. And so again, when we think about outreach, Beverly, I'm going to ask you if in finding that there are some barriers in hiring, how are you kind of using that inclusive lens to circumvent even some of the barriers that you identify?
I think a big part of it is advocating for those cultures as well. Like if we are limited in crew, and as Farnaz has said, it's like reaching out to the communities that we need information from and research from to advocate for them. So on my previous show, we had a big Indigenous storyline that we had to go through. And I reached out to a friend of mine who is within that community. And I went to production and I'm just like, hey, I do need this resource. Can we bring them on as a researcher or as someone who can be with us for a couple weeks and pay them and be like, they are an integral part of the storytelling and we need to be able to use their knowledge and use their culture to share what they know and so that we do this right and we are telling the story in the most accurate way that we possibly can. And I think, you know, just as if you were to bring somebody in who is a chef or a cook and they bring in advisors all the time to like plate, or it's the same thing. It's just for us, if we want to do true representation and to advocate for the stories that we are telling, I think that's a big part of it, is bringing in the people who aren't necessarily part of the union or not available because they're busy or what have you, but bringing outside into our world and say, hey, like we want to do justice to this story. Please share with us what you know. And I think that's a big part of it, is advocating for the very people that we are telling stories about and for. And yeah, that's how I would approach it. And that's what I did on my last show, which is reach out to community members and just ask them for, basically gave me a 2-week crash course on everything I needed to know about what is, you know, socially accurate and what is correct and best represented, so that we, you know, don't want to offend anybody, but also be sure that we trust what they're sharing with us as well. So yeah.
Thank you for that. I was been spending the weekends with production designers, and we're having a very similar conversation around, you know, the not creating microaggressions and stereotypes with design. And when we talk about cultural appropriation and, you know, thinking about what we're putting on screen in a way that can, you know, it's higher stakes, I think, because of our intercultural awareness. Yeah.
And when I had to justify it, it was the very reason. I'm like, well, you hire nurses and doctors to come in to teach actors how to put in an IV or what have you. Like, this is not anything, like, it's not any different. If I'm telling, if I'm telling this story and you want me to do it justice, I need, you know, someone with that expertise to come and teach me, because I don't know everything. So, and that was a perfect argument, if you want to say it, or negotiation for them to accept my my expert to come in and teach me. So yeah.
And so I'm tapping into a couple of things as well when we talk about you know, often having to address through union rules, and that can be a negotiation and having to justify, but also you know, how important it is in the culture shift that at every level that everybody is aware how important representation is. And so that it sounds like we're still in a place, probably not with all productions, but with some productions where we're having to justify why we would need to bring in expertise on our shows. Lindsay, what's top of mind on this conversation for you?
I would just completely agree, and Beverly has an excellent point too. And it just kind of comes down to really respect all around, to have advisors and regardless of what culture it is, but especially obviously as an Indigenous costume professional, I'm surprised at how many productions that I've come across that have Indigenous content, or Indigenous led or Indigenous crew, that they really didn't know what they were doing. Like, production had sort of, I guess, the best of intentions, but didn't know how to go about doing it, and in that way, if not doing it properly or respectfully, it does create barriers where then people are then sort of, they don't stories. I mean, the best way to do that is to across the board involve professionals that are part of the culture or teach the culture, just to make sure that you have the most accurate portrayal across the board for your production, regardless if it's costume or across all departments. It's just, I could definitely, if anybody wants to know about some of the things and the productions that I have worked on, I mean, I don't have time to get into all of them, but I'm more than happy to share my experience in a more broad way with everyone. Being an Indigenous person working on productions that are both Indigenous or not Indigenous. Can you still hear me?
We can, yeah.
I'm having some problems. Sorry, I'm in the car.
Okay.
Thank you for putting up with me.
Thank you. And so, Anissa, I want to, you're creating worlds and dressing folks, and I see when we talk about set supervising, and any thoughts around this conversation and the key pieces of what you're seeing and how to do some of that outreach.
Yeah, I think when it comes to hiring, there should be something. I mean, because we work on, for the most part, I work on IATSE productions, and so there are a set of rules and regulations that come with hiring or the hiring practice. You can't simply just hire somebody. But having said that, I think it should start with the unions or producers, to where they do make a conscious effort in order to diversify their crews, specifically when it comes to telling a specific racialized story. And I think it's just fair to point out that since Hollywood's inception, essentially, it's been majority white talent on screen and then white crew members for the majority. And I think that if you're going to specifically tell a South Asian story or a Black story, then you should have crew members and produces the whole work surrounding that show, so that when the actors feel more supported and comfortable on set, that they know that the level of care is going to be put into the production, the level of care, and also the accuracy, I would feel are the two biggest components as to why it's important to hire a crew that kind of surrounds the show that you're making. It's not to say that if you are not of this race, then you cannot work on this show. It's not to say that at all. But I do think that the effort needs to come from, either a union standpoint or producers that consciously make this effort. And it's hard to say if that will ever practically happen on a larger scale, because we do hire our friends or people that we know, or, it's very much through word of mouth. And so I feel like that can hinder what I'm suggesting. But I feel like if it does come from producers, or because then as a costume designer or as a set supervisor, you feel more empowered to I kind of lost my train of thought, but essentially, if you have the support from producers or from the union to hire the kind of crew that would support the show, I feel like all around it would create a more positive, loving, and inclusive show where the actors feel supported and the crew members feel that they're taking the time in order to create the accuracy for the story.
Thank you. Tova, your thoughts?
Yes, I do find it challenging. One thing I feel that we don't know everybody. And so groups like this, or even groups in person, it's great to see who's actually out there, who we can hire, and who's available to work, and to get to meet people face to face. I do, what Anissa was saying, I do also touch on that, where it is partially the producers or the production's responsibility to put people in head of department positions, people in key positions that reflect what's being made or the world that we live in. So I definitely know that shows where the head of department was somebody from a diverse community, it more reflected within the crew as well. You know, people are, I get emails all the time, or people on different social media, like being like, oh, I see that you've worked with, like they're attracted to, like they'll see a face and they're like, oh, you've worked with Gersha, how would I get into this? Like, so people just knowing that people are out there, they feel comfortable coming to somebody to, you know, inquire about the industry, inquire about how do they get involved. And I think just, you know, having that representation from any diverse group is helpful. And I feel like groups like this, and also like more events where we can meet people, would be very helpful. But yes, I do find it challenging because you only know who you know and who you've worked with. The union and resumes, you don't really know, you know, it's great to bring in dailies because that's another great way to meet people who you never may have met before, just through a union call. But yes, I do find it challenging.
Yeah. And so right now it feels like it's very much an organic database that you build, who comes to you, who you see, who you meet in that way. And having something, I think that because I'm privy to some of the conversations behind the scenes, that even in bargaining, most recently, talking about diversity initiatives from the studios and productions was on the table. I think that what has happened as well, and the conversations, is that we haven't, as labor organizations, collected data on even knowing who our members are, from, and I mean that from the employment data, so that when we talk about equity and hiring, that there are specific protected groups who have historically been excluded when we talk about the workforce, not just our industry. So when we talk about gender, when we talk about race, when we talk about disability, and when we talk about Indigenous people, that if you are to go and look at human rights and the equity of hiring and employment, that this is what we are talking about as historically excluded folks. And then when we look at it from our industry, how have we been complicit in kind of these exclusive practices? And you know, we may have had the best of intentions, and yes, word of mouth, and talking about that we don't purposefully discriminate. But when we look at the systems now, and this is what we're doing, that there are conversations happening with employer and unions around how do we do things differently so we can build in inclusive practices. And so some unions are actually getting permission to be able to start to collect data. And to do that. And so I think that that's important for us to recognize that, again, as we're identifying the barriers, I don't want folks to feel like, oh, okay, we're always stuck and we're stuck in this place. That as we are talking about culture shift, we're identifying where those barriers are, and how do we identify and then bring in practices to break down those barriers. And so when we think about different programs that are happening out there, when we're collecting data, and data is something that I think that as a creative, I didn't ever like numbers, except numbers tell a story. And I think that as we talk about stats and data, and we're collecting more of that within our film industry, but also here in Canada, around what's happening for historically excluded groups, that those numbers will help us in sharing how important it is to have more people who are able to work with our industry with a diverse background, but also the intersectional lens. And when I talk about intersectionality, it's that we all have overlapping identities. And so some of us may identify as racialized, as from the queer community, have a disability, that's 3 right there. And then we put in gender, right? So that we're able to start to understand how complex the stories are that we even tell. And so as storytellers, we also need to be complex and bring in that expertise and be able to see and build and create together through that. And so as we're shifting, we're starting to have deeper conversations. And I think that what I'm also seeing is that unions and productions are having to do more training, because you can tick off the box and look around and say, oh, look how diverse we are and look who I've hired. But if the set or production isn't safe, culturally safe for people to be working, and I'm seeing some nods, that I think that we also need to recognize that we need to ensure that when we're purposefully bringing on folks into our team, that it is culturally safe, that it isn't the microaggressions and the discriminatory actions or jokes that are there that we, sweep under the rug. And so I also want to share with you that through my company, but also through kind of larger studios as well, that the training there's a deeper dive that's happening around how to lead inclusively. Because as folks who may be in positions to hire, that you are dealing with more complex issues that are workplace issues, that we are doing this work through psychological health and safety, that inclusion does mean that we need to be able to make sure that we're working on shows that are culturally aware and sensitive to the crew as well as to the story. And so that's part of that culture shift that's happening right now. I do want to talk about opportunities to empower and to inspire, and that our panelists may have their own stories around how they open the door and keep the door open, and to be able to talk about mentoring, talking about how you train and skills build, how do you empower your teams to find their place within your departments and to be seen and heard, and to, even do the upskill, because at sometimes we're having to hire folks that maybe don't have the skill set, but it is our role to also support and build up our teams. And so Beverly, I know that mentorship and training is close to your heart, and I'm going to ask you to start us off on, giving us some antidotes and how you've done that, and how important it is to do the mentorship.
Thank you, Natasha. I love sharing information. I am not a hoarder of information, and I just want more people to be involved. So one of the ways that I do this is I know a lot of friends who do short films on the weekends and do indie productions. And if I'm in any way capable or able, I will bring anyone who's ever asked me, how do I do this? How do I get into this? And I literally say, come hang out with me one day on an indie set on a weekend. If you want to give up a weekend, come hang out with me. And I will bring them to set. I will bring them to the indie shoot or the short film that I'm doing at that time to just give them a taste. All of my coffee conversations is literally no holds bars. I don't mince words at all. I tell them the truth. I tell them this may look like glamour. It is not glamorous. You are working crazy. Like, I am truthful to the very point of, like, if this seems like something that you want to be involved with, then come on board. Any chance I get an opportunity to do that, I'm doing it. But yeah, mentorship is so important to me because I wouldn't be where I am today without the mentorship that was given to me. And on top of that, if I can encourage more people and the younger generation to see that these opportunities are available, I would just be repaying the very same people who gave me my options and my opportunity. And I just want to pass the baton. I just want to share as much as I can and keep learning. Like, if I have, more designers who were willing to take me on as someone who continuously wants to learn and just be part of their crew at not the capacity that I hold now, I'd be doing it. I think if we're in a position where we want to keep learning and also want to teach what we learn, the more diverse and the more opportunities we would create for other people is just the best thing we can do right now to the very subject matter that we're talking about. Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it, is to just create spaces where people feel safe to come on board and just to try it out and see if they like it. And also hiring people based off of their talents and their skill set and putting them in roles where they're going to thrive and just be the best version of themselves that they can be and to contribute to your department. And then doing check-in conversations. I check in with my crew at the beginning, middle, and end of every show and be like, so how is that for you? How did you like being a shopper on this show? Is there, you're being involved in this now. What other roles that you've seen that is within this department that you would like to try that maybe you'd like to try in the next one? I always leave that door open for people to express to me what they're curious about and what they're willing to get into. And if I can, and if I'm in a position where I can be like, okay, great, like on the next show, we're doing this. If you want to step into, assisting, and I feel like you're in a safe place that like we can do it, let's give it a go, let's try it and just see what happens. And I think that's a really great way to just let people, as Farnaz said, sink or swim. Like, you either figure it out or you don't. It's like, but also allowing people that chance to feel comfortable to speak up and say that this is where they want to grow or this is where they want to step into, and allowing them the space to do that without judgment and without fear that, they may or may not like do well, but it's giving people those choices and the opportunity to do so.
You're on mute.
Thank you. I think that, being able to hear your examples are inclusive leadership examples, knowing your team's strengths, being able to amplify those, to be able to check in, to give them opportunities to also explore are really key pieces. And I think that it's really interesting because we are in an industry where there's a hierarchy, it's a gig economy. So the competition for work, and not just even for the head of department role, but for work can be there. And so to counter that with the collaborative and inclusive practices, that sometimes I think that we have that scarcity mentality in our industry. And what you've explained is the absolute opposite of that, and that we continue working and empowering, and to be able to build a really strong team, that at some point you probably want somebody to go off if they're ready to design and to do that, and that it's not competition. It's, that you've been able to, in your leadership role, bring people together. And Farnaz, as a leader, I would like to invite you into the conversation around how do you build in that mentorship and training and inspiration within your team?
I personally am a firm believer of trying to promote within my team first. So because again, like Beverly, like I know their strengths and I know what they're good at and what they're, so if I have an opportunity to promote someone and allow them to grow into a new position or a new, like a leadership role within my team, I will start there first. I will ask first. I will let them have the opportunity to say, yes, I would like to take a chance to become, like, you know, a set supervisor or an assistant. You know, before I go and hire somebody else to come in for that position without giving them a chance. I have also trained so many people, you know, come in and gone through my team that have gone and succeeded. I love training people. I actually really love teaching people and watching them grow and watching them excel and get to, you know, higher positions. It's really kind of inspiring to me. And I also find that learning is a two-way street. So I'm always learning from people, and I am teaching them as well. So a lot of newcomers come in and, you know, they teach me a lot of stuff too, you know, because their skills in like technology and things like that are way ahead of my skills. And, you know, you learn from the younger generations. You know, they come in and they do something and you're like, wow, that speeds things up 10 times more than, you know, that I've done in the past 20 years. So, you know, why not? You know, so it's always really like, I like taking people under my wing and just kind of letting them flourish and develop their skills and learn from them as well. Like, you know, it's like I say, it's a two-way street, and, you know, so you're always learning and teaching each other, and you build community that way.
Yeah, thank you. Lindsay, I'm thinking about you and, you know, the expertise you have as a textile artist, bringing people in and empowering them to do this artistry as well. Do you want to share some of your thoughts?
I mirror what everyone else has been saying. I would love to get together with all these panelists and, you know, workshops and things. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. I'm also a knowledge sharer. I prefer to teach, and anything that knowledge that I have is, you know, is passed along. And I know that sometimes we get stuck in that, you know, training your replacement mentality, but I just don't think there's any space for it. I mean, everybody has so much to learn from each other and to teach each other. I mean, what you know, what are we doing? What are we saying by not, you know, empowering other people and teaching other people to be just as good as you know, any professional or the professionals that we are. I actually have had a chance to mentor people on set, and sometimes it's out of necessity that you go with somebody that doesn't maybe feel that they have the skills, but you see the potential in them. So, you know, you take a, you know, a risk by hiring somebody, and you get surprised by that. Specifically when it comes to aging and dying. I found, as you know, different positions within the costume department, but as somebody that focuses now almost specifically on aging and dying, there's always somebody that's popping their head into my workshop and just, you know, how are you dying, and, you know, teaching them measurements, and like it's literally, they're like, coming into your breakdown room is like coming into a mad scientist's workshop. Like, you know, you've got clothes on dummies that you're throwing blood at, or you're creating bullet holes, or, you know, reading a script and saying, okay, we have 10 exact copies of this suit. He starts in an office this day, and by day 7, he's been attacked by a bear. He's fallen out of a tree. Like, it's just there are definitely people that gravitate towards that, that are just thrilled with the journey that the clothing has to go through, and it actually becomes a character of itself for that actor. I would love to take on some people. I have actually put out some feelers before. I'm a member of Toronto Urban Indigenous, like all of the BIPOC film, all of the Facebook groups, and I have found that there are a lot of people, some like students, that are reaching out to me, saying, hey, I would love to learn this skill. And it doesn't matter where they're from. They can be somebody that's not in the industry, hoping to get into the industry, or student. And actually, I've had some fellow IATSE members say like, hey, I really like to learn this skill. Can I, come and see you one day? And I have a breakdown studio at home as well. So I'm like, hey, come on over. We'll just, have a breakdown day. And I mean, anybody else that is here that's participating, if you are interested in talking specifically about breakdown, I would love to talk to you.
That's great. And we will put some stuff in chat too, just around
Okay.
what people are interested in, connecting, and so we can track that as well. And thank you for the offer, Lindsay. Really appreciate that. Tova, what's top of mind when we think about kind of mentorship and training and how we support people on the team?
Well, mentorship was incredibly important for me. Once I joined the costume department, I became friends with the supervisor on my show, Karen Lee, who has mentored me from the day I met her, continuously mentoring me up until today. We speak at least a few times a week. Any questions I have, I can go directly to her. She can come back to me. And that's been extremely important with my day-to-day. But I feel like when I first got there, I was very open and I was very comfortable to share with her, what my goals were, where I wanted to head. And I feel like just being in an environment where you feel comfortable enough to share that with somebody is so important. So I try and make myself available so my team will be comfortable with me. So, if they have goals, or even if they would like to try something new, they feel comfortable enough to let me know that. And I might not have the answers, but one thing I do try and do is also connect people with other people who would be good as a mentor for them. So I try and share as much info as possible. I try to connect people who I feel would be a good match. I'm often telling my friends, oh, you need to meet this person, or you need to meet my friend. And I find that's another good way to, to share info, and for people to also find mentors, because there's a lot of times where you don't know who's actually out there, who's available to mentor, who's willing to mentor. And within our industry, I find it just so important to, share the knowledge and spread that. So
Thank you. Anissa, what are you thinking about and empowering the team, and what's worked for you? And
I think everyone said everything I wanted to say in terms of what you can do with your crew to empower them and to kind of figure out their skill set. What I would have to offer to this conversation is kind of what I would suggest people who are trying to get into the industry or new people do. So for example, one thing that, a couple of panelists said already was ask questions, and just don't be afraid to just ask what you are wanting to know, because in my experience, and I'm seeing that in a lot of yours as well, like we've all had mentors that contributed to our success in this industry. And I feel like most people are willing to talk and share their stories. Like, I feel like there are very few gatekeepers. So if you ask people questions and try to get into their head of their journey, or even just general questions that you might have about how to do a particular thing, people are very willing to let you know and to share that information with you. So never feel like you might be annoying, because sometimes I felt that way myself. I felt like, oh, they might feel like I'm asking too many questions, but at the end of the day, it's just a question. And the worst that could happen is it cannot be answered. Also, trying to find, so when I first started off, Instagram was pretty much in its inception. And so I wasn't able to find people like I feel like you are able to now. Google was kind of my best friend back then, but I feel like now with social media, you're able to find industry professionals because we have it in our bios, or we're a part of organizations like CAFTCAD, and you're able to reach out to people who are in the industry that you're in, that do what you want to do. And so you're able to potentially find a mentor that way as well. And then if you are in the union, I feel like going on daily calls is a really good way. I think Tova mentioned this earlier, or Beverly, to meet new people. If you're constantly working with new people, you're able to learn from those people, and also they're able to recommend you on future gigs. If they know somebody who's looking to hire someone, they can be like, oh, I just worked with so-and-so. So it's really good to get yourself out there on daily calls once you're in the union. But then even reaching out to people through social media, through workshops like this. CAFTCAD is a really good organization to meet and network with costumers in various different positions. So I think that that is some pretty sound advice for if you're trying to excel further for yourself, and just mimicking what everybody else said in terms of if you are the hiring in the key position, if you are the leader, the designer, some of the things that you can do to support your team. But yeah, I feel like this conversation and workshops like this is really important for people who are looking to get into the industry, give them insight, and also to hear a little bit of what they can anticipate. And it's not, I mean, we are speaking a lot about some barriers that come up, but if you are pleasant and if you are a good worker, you will get work. That's just, I do want to make that clear, because it does seem kind of daunting to hear barriers that there are, and that you know you can't avoid barriers. They're everywhere you go. But I feel like as long as you're a pleasant person to work with and you enjoy what you do and you're good at what you do, you will get work and you will be successful.
Thank you. And I think that, you know, the important piece when we talk about film can be hard, and it can, some of our, you know, there's some hard days that can be in film. And, you know, I don't necessarily want to shy away from the fact that, you know, I had brought it up before around building inclusive workplaces, because there can be adversity. And we can experience that, and we kind of dust ourselves off, and we keep doing this work, and that there's that passion behind it. But that enable, you know, to be able to do this work, I think that we also need to recognize how important it is for, you know, in the same way, I think, Anissa, that you talked about producers and the higher ups really wanting to have those inclusive practices and empowering the crews to do that, that we also have to ensure that when there are issues that arise, that they're being dealt with in a good way and in a meaningful way, so that people are feeling that they can work in a workplace and not worry about the microaggressions or the adversity. And when we talk about the isms, sexism, racism, when we talk about, you know, 2017, and I think it broke through Harvey Weinstein, but we as an industry started to talk more around how important it was to believe people and to report when harassment was happening. And I think that as we are becoming a more potentially more diverse workplace, that we also need to recognize that discrimination can come up in the workplace, and to be able to address that on our teams and in the workplace, and also with our unions, is really important in talking about and eradicating some of those roadblocks and being proactive around building inclusive teams. And I think that what you've all shared in this last question has been really important in all of your inclusive leadership and perspective. I also want to ask the question around the ability to think about, because we have everybody on this space in this room, to really kind of break down when we think about the various positions in the costume department and those relatable and transferable skills that can be there. You know, we've talked about, you know, Lindsay sharing that it could be anybody popping in and saying, hey, I want to learn this skill set. But I'm wondering, from the panel's perspective, you know, what are some of those key learnings when we think about transferable or relatable skill set, that if anybody listening or watching this later, to know that you have that skill set. And Tova, I'm going to ask you, when you think about costume department and when you talked about it being something that you don't have the same passion around fashion, but you have a skill set that's needed within the department. And so if we can start with you and just talk about the skill sets that you bring and how important it is in connecting all of those pieces within a department.
Okay, well, I think with me in particular, I'm really interested in organization and organizing and bringing people together. Also, as I mentioned, in my past I had planned events, so I kind of look at the department, especially when getting started, as planning a large event, and so those skills and this like my skills within bringing people together, interpersonal skills. I feel that like if you just enjoy or have a passion for people, or dealing with a team of people, and using those skills that way, it doesn't have to necessarily be within the fashion or the designing side of it. But I do feel that bringing skills that I had from even within my business, where I had to bring in people from outside hiring and figuring out what their skills were, and using them within my business when I had the bakery. So even if they did not have baking skills, some people had art skills, some people had personal skills where they could deal with customers and just dealing with, with different people and finding what their skill sets are, what they want to do going in the future, or what they'd like to learn. So yeah, that was a little.
No, it's great. I think, yeah. And I think, Anissa, I'm going to ask you the same as a key set supervisor and the work that you do. What are some of those skill sets or transferable skill sets that you have used and brought into your work that maybe somebody who's wanting to do what you do wouldn't even think that they would need to have that piece of it in what they do?
The main thing for me, honestly, is working well with a team. And I feel like in elementary school, they start you off with that really early because it is a really important factor when it comes to working on a team. And especially for something like a costume department, because there are so many different skill sets that each position has, and to be able to come together, that's really important. So something I wouldn't have thought that you would need to be a people person necessarily to work in film or in the costume department, but it's really important. And if you're not, it will just make things harder. So it's not like it's impossible if you're not a people person, but it makes things harder for sure. And then just organization. I feel like that's why I'm good at either being a coordinator or being a set supervisor, because I pay attention to detail and I'm very organized. And that's something that can transfer if you were to be an age or a breakdown, because you have to be able to strategically like plan out your first steps to your last steps. It's not just something that you can just go in on a whim for. Very similar to buying. You have to be really organized. You have to know the traffic. You have to know the locations of things and to plan out where you need to be. So organization is a transferable skill that has helped me in all of my positions that I've done so far. And being personable. Those are the two things that come to mind. The first two things.
I appreciate that. Finance.
I'm going to just start by saying, like, for kind of everybody who is not actually currently in costumes, costume is a huge department. There's various positions within the department. You have anywhere from people on set, dressing background, to dressing cast, to people at the office who help prep, line up, supervisors who run and manage the department, shoppers, you have your sewing team, which you have your stitchers and your cutters, and you also have your breakdown and build team, which can be anywhere from like agers, dyers, leather workers, machinists. We do a lot of like 3D printing. We do a lot of model casting, so if you have, like ability to like carve and cast and, clay work, like you can get into the costume department on those skills. We have illustrators who help the designers, like, draw out their thoughts and designs. You have your assistants, you have so many people, and there's so many transferable skills. So if you have illustration skills, if you know how to draw, like that's a really good transferable skill into costumes as an illustrator. Or even printing on fabrics, like or painting on fabrics. We do a lot of that. So that's another, getting into the aging and dyeing. It's a lot of it is airbrushing on costumes, just a lot of that stuff can be transferred into costumes. We have so many talented people in our department and so many levels that people can get in at. So it's not always just, you need to know fashion. I've had people who do cosplays in LARP, join our team just to help out with building costumes. They do a lot of foam work, like something that is really helpful in building a quick armor, for example, and making it look real. Like they are really good at that because that's what they do for fun. And you can bring that skill into the costume department and join us, and make a career out of it. So yeah, so it's a lot of skills that are transferable. Other, organization is really helpful. Accounting is really helpful. If you have any accounting skills, we have a lot of people who just basically their job is to help the shoppers with their, receipts and credit card statements, and help the accounting department code, shopping purchases to the budget accounts, and do budgeting and track shipments. We have shipping coordinators now because we order so much stuff in. So there's a lot of transferable skills that can get you into the costume department. So always ask. And I also want to just add one thing to what Anissa and Trevor were saying in the last question, is the fact that if you are in the department and you ever want to move up, or if you want to try a different skill, don't be afraid to ask about it. Always go to your supervisor or your designer and just talk to them and say, hey, I really would like to try doing this position now, because it's really important to make them aware of the fact that you want to try something new or you want to try something different. If you don't let them know, they won't know. So they can't move you up or give you that opportunity if you don't ask them. And when you come in as a day call, make sure to introduce yourself to your department heads. Make sure you let them know who you are and make them aware and see that they see you. Because if they know who you are, next time they want somebody, they'll call for you. Or the next day, if they need an extra body, they'll call for you because you've made yourself known. So don't be afraid to ever ask or introduce yourself to your department heads.
Thanks for all the gold. And it's just like the department expanded by times 1,000, and you just kind of breaking down all of those possibilities, which is really exciting. Beverly, anything to add around transferable skills and
honestly, echoing what Farnaz just said, anybody who finds out that I work in film, and it's not just in our department, it's film industry as a whole. You can literally come from any walk of life and come onto a film set, and most likely will be able to do something. Like, PAs, for example, like you can, like anybody can guard a truck. Do you know what I mean? Like it's anything that you have learned or skills that you've picked up or anything of the sort is transferable within the film industry. There is a place for you here. And the same thing as Farnaz said, within the costume department, there is so much, and it really helps that you are a Jane or a Jack of all trades. It really helps. And you don't, like, the only thing I ask for people coming into like the costume department, like you can have all the accounting skills you have, you don't have to know anything about clothes, but the only thing I ask is that you know how to hem a pant and put on a button and sew on a button. That's it. Everything else I can put to somebody's expertise or to their their level of knowledge. But ultimately, if you're coming into my department and you are handling the numbers, great. But if I'm in a bind and I need someone to fix a button or sew a button, you need to know how to do that. But other than that, like, it's whatever you want to share your knowledge in, feel free. That would be my biggest thing.
Note to self, I was just wondering about my button skills right now. Conscious of time, and Lindsay, I know you're on the road a little bit. Anything more to add around the transferable skills? A lot of it was covered, but you might have a gem to share.
Yeah, sorry, I lost connection there. Thank you for putting up with me. I hope everybody's enjoying the journey that I'm going on and wondering where I'm going and what I'm doing. Transferable skills, 100%. I was thinking a few questions ago, like if there's drive and not experience, it's very easy to give those people experience by teaching them or mentoring them. Part of the reason why I started to train Indigenous, well, I mean, women, but it doesn't need to be women, it could be anyone. We have a lot of beaters and people that work with leather and work with hides and work with furs, and that 100%, it's such a transferable skill. I mean, what we do, what we create, it's just to think people don't realize that they can do this and that this is a career, and have a good career and make a good living from doing things that are just their natural skills. I mean, I'm excited for people when I get to see the joy of them realizing like they're really good at it, and it's not something they ever thought that they could do. So again, this is another reason why I keep a close eye on Indigenous forums on Facebook specifically, and anytime that somebody I need a volunteer or somebody that wants to come and shadow me. I mean, I love that, and I love the joy that it brings to them that they're doing something they love.
Thank you. So Glenn has kindly put some gems in the chat as well around inclusive practices. I'm conscious of time. 2 hours flies by when we're having this much fun, but want to make sure that while we have the panelists here, if somebody does have a question, we have time to answer maybe one or two. And so invite you, if there is a question, either to raise your hand using the reactions button, which is the happy face with the plus sign, and you can raise your hand and we can see it, or you can write it in chat and we'll look for that in chat. Any questions for our panelists?
I have a question.
Okay, come on, let's hear it.
Okay, for the panelists. Now, I work within the marketing side for CAFTCAD. I've just started about 6 months ago, and wanting to be able to get more eyes within the community of costume design on CAFTCAD to be able to help out. In addition to, I have taken notes, so for your outreach and doing networking events and, pushing a little bit more for mentorship, is there anything else that you would suggest to be able to market the industry of costume design to those that don't know anything about it?
I'd like to answer this one. My school, when I went to fashion school or art school in general, didn't have any of these resources. And when I was at my school, the reason why I picked AI was that they said they had like 80% job placement after graduation. What I didn't know at the time was when I was getting ready to graduate, the resources that were coming up was mostly retail. And as somebody who had been working in retail since she was 14, I did not pay $40,000 to go get an education and end up back in retail. So I would highly, highly recommend marketing to colleges, universities, art schools of any kind, and say CAFTCAD exists and we offer mentorship programs and we offer all these things to the very people that we're trying to bring into this industry. And to just let them know that these options are available. And then I would encourage anybody who ever went to a school or an art school to reach out to your old, like, I can't even think of the word right now, but the person who brought you into the school at all, and just reach out to their head office and be like, hey, I was a graduate from this school. I'd love to come back and do a speak or like a, a presentation of, like for example, this spring, I'm going back to my hometown in Calgary to do a talk to my old high school to be like, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm doing to my theater, with my theater teacher who's still there. So yeah, I would just recommend that to anybody who's in a position where they can do that, to please do that. So we keep giving back to the next generation.
And just doing, like Beverly says, like, just having like information panels at schools would be really, helpful. Having people that do different positions in costume department speaking out and to these students, and just allowing them to know that there are options other than, retail out there for them, that they can get their foot wet. So
Janelle has a question in the chat. Are there currently any trainee programs in the works to expose more people in the industry, other than just kind of inviting them individually to shadow? And that might be
I will say this, that I know Tessa already put this in the chat as well. CAFTCAD offers a lot of online courses and online programs for people who can either join CAFTCAD and have access to it all the time, or pay for the classes if you're not a CAFTCAD member. But I also know that the Costume Designers Guild in the US also does the same thing, so that you can take courses with them and learn, and other than just shadowing. And I believe a lot of the unions are also starting, like I know IATSE in BC is starting to offer courses as well, and opportunities to take courses. So
thank you very much. And there's information being popped into the chat as well. You'll see from CAFTCAD, which we know is Tessa. There is a visa question, which is really hard to answer in the holdup piece of it, because yeah, I mean, still when we're in the industry and working, that if you don't have the papers and the visa paperwork to work in the country, it is very limiting. But the question is, and I don't know if anybody can answer, what would you suggest when getting film theater job that my chances are held up by visa documents, making it impossible to sign a contract? Maybe some of us have had that problem. And so I don't know if there's anybody on the call who has had some visa stuff, but I know that, it's pretty strict. It's as well as tax credits. So I don't know if there's anybody who can really answer that question.
Right.
May I
Oh, go
speak?
ahead.
Go for it, Glenn. You probably know more than I do.
Okay, thanks. That's a great question. And from experience, I can tell you that any visa work, document work should be done by the production company that you are hoping or you have a job with. They will have to incur the costs of an immigration lawyer who will do up all of the paperwork. Other than just applying for yourself, I think it's standard as to what a person would be doing just to come into a country to work anyways. If you already have that job, the production company should be doing that work for you. That's it.
Thank you, Glenn. And then go
Just
ahead,
to
Beverly.
add to that, for someone who had to go somewhere else and do that without intention of falling into film at all, I would just suggest while you're waiting, if you're like an individual just coming into the country and just waiting on like proper paperwork and all this other stuff, is to reach out local communities for independence and like short films and like student films where you can just build a resume to say that you have experience in it so that you can get your face out there in general, so that when you do have the paperwork ready to rock and roll, you can reach out to the people that have been doing that and say, hey, the paperwork's ready, I'm ready to rock and roll whenever you have something available or what have you. It's just a great way to you to start networking. But that would be my approach to it.
That's great. And so a couple more questions we have. Lauren asks, any general tips for networking specifically as a fashion student?
I think just a lot of the things we touched on already in this conversation. I mean, knowing kind of what you want to do more specifically, Lauren, would help you kind of seek out the kind of mentor that you would need or that you would want to have. But organizations like CAFTCAD and resources that they offer, reaching out to people that you may know, people maybe on this call that you might want to get in contact with afterwards. I think starting there and then just start with your questions to gain more of a clarity for yourself as to, you know, which avenue you want to end up going down.
Wonderful.
Because like Fairness said, there are so many positions that, I mean, you might have an interest in design, but you might actually be better in breakdown or aging. And so there are just so many options for you to explore.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to be a pest. Like, we get over 100 emails every day. So email us often or bug us often, and we'll eventually find a time and an opportunity to get back to you. But don't be afraid to be a pest. Like, check in all the time.
Don't give up.
Yeah.
Really, honestly, like, you know, if a lot of times, like when people take a few days or a couple weeks to get back to you, it's not because that they don't want to, it's just that because time doesn't allow. You know, our days are long, and like Bev says, we get over 100 emails a day, sometimes more, and it's just finding the time to respond back. But eventually somebody will give up, you know, get back to you, and just keep pursuing. And Instagram and Facebook, you know, just follow people and message them and DM them on there. It's like really, I think it really helps to do that. I have, like I said, like I have tons of people reaching out to me on daily basis, asking me questions, and I honestly have no problem answering them as soon as I can. So.
Thank you. There is one more question about data, and I want to just tie that in, Farnaz, I think, around the work that you're doing with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And I had and talk about data as being able to tell a story, to, you know, that there's the emotionality piece of inclusion and belonging, but to have the data often allows for us to find the resources to tell the actual story of where inequities are. And, the question asking, if somebody is questioning the need for or the value of collecting diversity data, I'm wondering from your perspective as a board member of CAFTCAD, as a film worker and union member, but as well from Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, if you have any last thoughts around how important it is to have some of these stats and how you would answer that when somebody questions what's the point of that?
Having the stats really kind of gives us a perspective of where we are at and what we need to do to move forward and to really make the changes that we need to do. It really kind of like highlights where the holes are and where the focus needs to go and what efforts we need to make. So it's really important to have this data for us to be able to like direct and create programs or awareness and paths where we can move forward and build on this diversity, and so that we're no longer having to discuss it and that it's a habit that we kind of live with and that it's open and it's a common thing, that it's not sort of something that that we have to work hard at anymore. It's something that's everything included in our everyday, so that we are inclusive without having to think about it and without having to force it. So it's important to have the data in order for us to kind of figure out what path we're taking to make things better. So
Wonderful. So I think that we are at the end of our session. A practice that I like to do is to be able to close our time with a gratitude. I'm going to speak my gratitude, but I would like to invite everyone on our call to write in chat a gratitude for each other. You may have met somebody really great in the breakout room, but also gratitude for our time and our panelists, and for CAFTCAD for inviting us to come together. And so please write your gratitude in chat. I want to thank CAFTCAD and Farnaz and Tova and Beverly and Anissa and Lindsay for spending this time with us and for sharing your wisdoms and your thoughts and being really generous with just how we can do this work in a good way. So a lovely way to spend part of the Sunday. So thank you for that.
Lovely to have been a part of it. I'm very happy, and I'm here for anybody if they need some more information.
yeah, thank you everybody for coming out and joining us on this Sunday, and really hope that you guys got the information you need, and please feel free to reach out and we will connect you to whoever is able to help you get to where you need to go.
Yeah, I just want to second that. Thank you for CAFTCAD for providing this opportunity for all of the panelists, but then also the participants to be able to kind of share back and forth. I mean, it's spaces like this that are needed for what we're talking about. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, CAFTCAD, for putting this on and for having me be a part of it. I'm so thrilled that I can share what I'm passionate about, which is bringing more inclusivity into our industry. So, and thank you for everybody for tuning in on a Sunday.
Thank you so much to CAFTCAD for and for the panelists and for everybody who came in and joined today. I feel like the more we talk about this, it does become more of the norm, and it's just, hopefully going forward, it won't even need to be a conversation. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us for And Action on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. To learn more about CAFTCAD and how to become a member, please visit caftcad.com. While you're there, check out our events and courses page to see all of our upcoming events, both virtual and physical. We hope you enjoyed this workshop recording today.